You ever sit across from a man who's secretly sleeping with your wife while he tells you you're emotionally avoidant and need to try harder for her? Because I have. It's a weird kind of humiliation. Not loud, not the slap you in the face kind. It's more like standing in a warm shower and slowly realizing it's blood running down the drain. His name was Dr. Marcus Hale, couples therapist, 50-something, salt and pepper beard, the kind of voice that makes you feel like you're in trouble and being tucked in at the same time. He had a small private practice in a converted carriage house with fake plants and overpriced leather chairs. The kind of guy who starts every sentence with a sigh and ends it with a rhetorical question. Maybe the real question, Ben, is why vulnerability makes you so uncomfortable. Yeah, I used to think I was just a difficult husband. Now I know better. But let's rewind. Back when I still believed this was salvageable, I was driving my wife, Marissa, to therapy once a week. Monday nights. Same time, every time. She'd started crying during sex and snapping at me about loading the dishwasher wrong. And I thought, hey, maybe this is a rough patch. That's what you do when you've been married 10 years and have a mortgage together and a dog named Olive who pees on the welcome mat every time someone rings the doorbell. You try. You get help. You spend $250 an hour to let a stranger mediate your passive-aggressive marital chess match while pretending not to judge your childhood trauma. And for the first few sessions, I thought maybe it was working. Marissa seemed more present, less angry, less sigh-heavy. We were talking more, touching more. She even smiled at me once while we made breakfast, and I remember thinking, okay, we're healing. What I didn't realize then was that I wasn't in therapy. I was in rehearsal. She and Marcus? They were already performing the lead roles in a drama I hadn't even auditioned for yet. But like any good dupe, I didn't catch on at first. I did the work. I brought my stupid little leather-bound notebook and wrote down the assignments he gave us every week. Like, each of you write a letter describing a moment when you didn't feel heard. Try 30 seconds of eye contact every morning before work. Ben, express a soft startup complaint without problem solving. Right. Except the homework. I was getting started to get weird. One week, he suggested I do a trust cleanse. I asked what that meant. He said, let her go out for the night without checking in. Full freedom. No questions. Practice detachment. I said, that sounds like how we got here in the first place. Marissa smiled like he'd told a great joke. Another week, he had me read aloud from a book called The Gentle Husband's Guide to Emotional Labor. While he watched, Marissa highlighted passages. I felt like I was slowly being turned into the court jester of my own marriage. But every time I pushed back, he'd tilt his head like I'd just farted in church and murmur something like, control is often the last defense of the anxious partner. The worst part? I bought it. I genuinely thought I was the problem. That is, until the receipt. It was a Friday night. Marissa said she was going to a hot yoga class with her friend Justine, left in leggings and a hoodie. Even did the no-makeup, messy bun thing to sell it. I was watching Olive chew a sock when I remembered she left her iPad on the kitchen counter. I grabbed it, figured I'd toss it in her bag next time she came home. It lit up with a restaurant receipt notification. Fancy place. Steakhouse. 9:27 p.m. 2 entrees. 2 drinks. I didn't recognize the second name on the bill, but it looked familiar. Marcus Hale. At first, I thought, no way. No, that's crazy. Then I remembered something from therapy 2 weeks earlier. Marcus had told me, sometimes, Ben, it's not about being right. It's about being present. Marissa had said the same thing to me 2 nights before he did. Word for word. I scrolled back through the text threads on the iPad. There weren't many. She deleted regularly. But she missed one. A pinned note in the Notes app titled Script Ideas. And there it was. Scene idea. M and B in therapy. Therapist slowly replaces husband as primary support. Line. It's not about being right. It's about being present. I stared at it. Not a script. A plan. And I realized I wasn't the one in therapy. I was the audience. They were writing a story together. One where he plays the wise mentor and she plays the overburdened wife. And I'm the villain who just doesn't do the work. So I did what any good villain does. I plotted. I didn't confront her. Didn't yell. Didn't throw the iPad or text Justine or drive to the restaurant and flip a table. I just sat there, petting the dog, and started thinking like a producer. Because if they wanted this to be a show, I was going to write the final act. And I already knew how it would end. I didn't say a word for 2 weeks. Not because I was scared. Not even because I was stunned. but because something shifts in you when you realize your marriage isn't a relationship anymore. It's a case study, and you're the unwitting subject. The trust cleanse? Turns out, it wasn't about trust. It was about freedom, theirs, not mine. So while Marissa floated around the house humming more than usual and Marcus kept assigning empathy journals, I quietly shifted gears. From participant to observer. From subject to documentarian. From husband to, well, we'll get there. The next time we were in session, Marcus leaned back and said something that would have broken me a month earlier. Ben, I sense resistance in your energy. I looked him dead in the eye and replied, I'm just focused. He smiled like I was finally doing the work. Meanwhile, I had a pen camera clipped to the inside of my shirt pocket, recording every word. It wasn't even expensive. Amazon, $42. Arrived in a discreet box that I ordered to my office, not the house. Battery life, 6 hours. Perfect for an hour of marital theater and 5 hours of back-end analysis. Over the next few sessions, I logged everything. Tone, language, subtle touches, like how Marissa laughed harder at his jokes than mine. How her hand would casually graze his arm during certain breakthroughs. How he always sat 1 inch too close when handing her tissues. And then, the kicker. It was a Thursday night, and Marissa was in the shower. Her phone buzzed. Reflex kicked in. I glanced at it. Just a message preview. From a number saved under MH Office. Thinking about last night. That dress was distracting. I didn't need to see the rest. I didn't even need to unlock the phone. What I needed was his voice. Because the licensing board doesn't care about hunches. They don't investigate bad vibes or suspicious therapy games. But you give them a therapist, a licensed professional, discussing sex with a current patient, they care. They revoke. So I got smart. I emailed Marissa's phone to myself from her laptop while she was drying her hair. Not the content, just the backup structure. Enough to clone it on a burner. Then I did something I'm still proud of. I waited. Because timing is everything. You can't detonate too soon. You need people in position. And the right moment arrived the following Monday. We were back in that same dim office. Marissa had just told a story about how I once belittled her by correcting her on a crossword clue in front of friends. Marcus clucked his tongue and looked at me like I was the Grinch who stole her self-worth. Ben, do you ever feel the need to dominate conversations? I smiled. Only when I know I'm being gaslit. Marissa blinked. What? I stood up, walked to my briefcase, and pulled out a small black recorder. Laid it on the table between us. Then pressed play. Marcus's voice came through, not from a therapy session, but from a dinner. I don't know how much longer we can pretend this is ethical. Don't worry. I'll say he's making progress. Just keep sending him the assignments. It's working. Marissa's jaw opened like a fish gasping for air. Marcus, professional, polished, practiced Marcus, didn't flinch. He just said, that's a deep fake. Which would have been a clever lie, if I hadn't followed it up with Exhibit B. A printed receipt from the restaurant. Signed by both of them. Time-stamped. I slid it across the table like an attorney in a courtroom drama. You were at the Elmwood last Friday. I called. You ordered the lamb. Silence. I let it breathe. Then I stood, picked up my recorder, and said, this concludes our session. Walked out, got in my car, and drove straight to a different office. This one belonging to a friend of mine who works in licensing enforcement. Handed him the file. He didn't even look surprised. You'd be shocked how often this happens, he muttered, thumbing through the printouts. Oh, I said. I'm not. But the next part? That was the fun part. See, Marcus had a record. Not criminal, professional. A previous warning for boundary concerns with a former client. And he had an ex-wife. I found her on Facebook. A little digging revealed she ran a small podcast about betrayal and recovery. It wasn't huge, maybe a few thousand listeners per episode, but it had teeth. I emailed her. Subject line, I have a story. It involves your ex. She replied in 14 minutes. Call me. Now. The interview was arranged 2 days later. Remote recording. Pseudonym used. All names changed except his. She insisted. I told the full story. From the first homework assignment, to the restaurant receipt, to the therapy tape. She played the audio on air. Listeners went ballistic. The episode went viral in a very specific, very satisfying corner of the internet, the therapist ethics world. Within a week, the board had suspended Marcus pending investigation. Within 2, his client list dried up. And Marissa? She never tried to defend him. She didn't even call. I think deep down, she always knew she was the supporting actress in someone else's script. She just didn't realize I was the one holding the camera. But we're not at the ending yet. No, the ending deserves something quieter, colder, cleaner. Let's call this Act 2. Because revenge isn't a single moment. It's a slow, deliberate edit, scene by scene, frame by frame, until you control the final cut. I expected backlash, rage texts, teary voicemails, a flaming bag of guilt and shame dropped on my metaphorical porch. Instead, nothing. That's how I knew I'd really won. See, people don't stay silent because they're innocent. They stay silent when they're caught, really caught. Not in a we can talk this through kind of way, but in a the tape is rolling, the credits are printing, and you're the villain kind of way. Marcus vanished like smoke. One day, he was a trusted therapist with hand-drawn 5-star reviews on Yelp and a New York Times paperback in his lobby. The next, his practice website was down. Phones rang to voicemail. And Dr. Marcus Hale became a warning thread on a therapist review forum, avoid, boundary violator, ongoing investigation. His ex-wife, let's call her Dana, kept her promise. The podcast dropped like a bomb. It wasn't just the episode. It was the rollout. Clips on TikTok, teasers on Instagram, hashtags like #therapistaffair and #homeworkfromhell. She even posted a moody black and white photo of a shattered picture frame with the caption, "Turns out some therapists need therapy." The episode was called Gaslight, Gatekeep, Girl Boss, and Also Sleep with Your Clients. Charming. When I listened to the full thing for the first time, I'll admit, I flinched. Hearing your own voice describe your unraveling, laid bare for thousands of strangers, is a little like watching your own surgery on replay. But then came the comments. This guy's delivery is ice cold. I'm obsessed. Not him recording a therapy session like a Bond villain. I would have cried. He went full documentary. Can we get him back for a follow-up? Turns out, revenge plays really well in serialized audio. Dana emailed me 2 days later. You're the most downloaded guest I've ever had. Want to come back for Q&A? I passed. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about catharsis. It was about framing the story correctly. Because after a decade of marriage, after a year of therapy turned soft betrayal, and after months of being told I was the problem, it was finally my version that went public. Marissa didn't respond publicly. She did, however, start dating a personal trainer named Colin who had no idea what he was walking into. I know this because I got a very polite message from him one evening. Hey man, don't want to overstep, but I've been seeing Marissa for a bit, and I feel like there's a lot of context I'm missing. Just wondering if there's anything I should know. I replied with a link. Dana's podcast. Never heard from him again. Marissa moved out 2 weeks later. Left behind a mug, 2 scarves, and Olive, the dog, not the garnish. I kept her. She was too old to bounce between apartments and new personalities. The house felt huge after that. Empty, but not hollow. Like someone had vacuumed up the static and left the signal intact. I went back to work. Took on a few consulting gigs. Helped a friend launch a new health app. Even got invited to speak on a panel about digital footprints and modern infidelity. I turned that one down. The irony felt a little too poetic. But I didn't stop documenting. That was the part one couldn't shake. It had started as defense, gather evidence, get justice, control the narrative. But now it was something else. I found myself watching people. Not in a creepy way. More like a filmmaker scouting characters. Like the barista at my local cafe who wrote breakup poetry on every cup sleeve. Or the couple on the park bench who only talked to their dog and not each other. Or the woman on the train who always removed her wedding ring at the same station. The world was full of little betrayals. And for the first time, I saw them all. One night, Dana called me out of the blue. Hey, I have a wild idea. Go on. I'm launching a new podcast. Another one? This one's different. Less sob stories. More structure. More narrative justice. Sounds cathartic. I want you to host it with me. I laughed. You want me to be the betrayal whisperer? I want you to be the voice of the aftermath. The guy who didn't just get hurt. The guy who edited the footage. I didn't say yes. Not right away. But I didn't say no. Because what do you do when your entire life gets hijacked by someone else's story? You start telling your own. Marissa, for what it's worth, stayed quiet. I think somewhere in that overly curated Instagram brain of hers, she realized that the worst thing that could happen wasn't being exposed. It was being ignored. Her therapist affair never made national headlines. No Dateline specials. No Netflix docuseries. But it became something far more dangerous to people like her. A footnote. A cautionary tale on a podcast episode titled The Therapist, the Wife, and the Tape Recorder. It's the kind of episode that gets shared in Facebook groups and whispered about at brunch. And it ends with my voice saying, sometimes, the truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be recorded. 15 years ago, I was in a band. Not a good one. We wore vests ironically, covered Arctic Monkeys songs unironically, and once played a battle of the bands in the back parking lot of a craft brewery in Connecticut. We lost. To a guy who brought a didgeridoo. But I remember this one quote our drummer used to say, right before going on stage. He'd smack his sticks together and shout, "No one's here for the truth. They're here for the story." At the time, I thought it was dumb. Now I think it belongs in a museum. Because once Dana's podcast dropped, and people started hearing my voice on their commutes, over their dishwashing, during their cardio, something changed. The story took on a life of its own. It wasn't just about a therapist who slept with his patient. It was about a man who documented the whole thing, exposed them, and walked away without screaming, without crying, without sending a single rage text at 2 a.m. Just recorded, spliced, released. The public ate it up. Our DMs flooded with stories. Messages from strangers who'd found lipstick stains on receipts, or emails that read like bad novellas. Or, in one case, a woman who found her husband's affair partner inside a gratitude journal he gave her for Christmas. They all wanted to talk, to confess, to process. But more than anything, they wanted clarity. They wanted what I had, narrative justice. The clean arc. The controlled frame. So I said yes to Dana's offer. We called the new podcast Clean Cut. Tagline: you bring the mess. We bring the edit. She handled the production. I handled the questions. And somehow it worked. The first guest was a woman who caught her fiancé cheating because he reused proposal speech lines on an ex's Instagram post. The second was a man who hacked into his wife's old Pinterest board and found a secret wedding plan for her and her coworker, complete with floral budget and guest list. And then came episode 4. The one that went viral. It was a story about a high school teacher whose wife had an affair with her student's dad. What made it unforgettable wasn't just the betrayal. It was how he exposed it. During parent-teacher conferences, by swapping their slideshow presentation with a montage of texts, timestamps, and a voice memo of the dad whispering, "Tell him I'll help with math again next Thursday." The video version hit 8 million views in 5 days. BuzzFeed wrote a piece called The Rise of Revenge Podcasts. Our inbox exploded. And Marissa? She finally broke her silence. Kind of. She posted a black and white selfie on Instagram. Caption: everyone's got their version of the truth. Just remember who edited the footage. Subtle. Passive. Predictably defensive. I didn't respond. But I did notice she turned off her comments after someone posted, "We believed in you until we met the GoPro." Then came the New York Magazine request. An interview. Not about me. About the podcast. The phenomenon. The way people were reclaiming their betrayals through narrative. They quoted me at the end of the piece. "There's no revenge sweeter than clarity, especially when you get to narrate it." They even gave me a photo shoot. They had me stand on a soundstage in front of a gray backdrop, arms crossed, holding a pair of over-the-ear headphones like I was auditioning for the cover of a self-help noir album. Dana thought it was hilarious. I'm making that our banner image. The audience grew. We started getting live show offers, sponsorships, merch suggestions. One woman sent us a mock-up of a hoodie that said, "Trust cleanse this." I ordered 3. But here's the thing no one tells you about success that comes from betrayal. It's addictive. Not the attention, the control. When someone rips the foundation out from under you, and you rebuild it not just stronger, but louder, you start to crave the next crack in someone else's wall. You become a little too fluent in the art of uncovering, a little too skilled at pattern recognition. Which brings me to the party. A fundraiser, technically, for a nonprofit Dana supported. I showed up mostly to support her, sip something with an herb in it, and wear a jacket that said, "I'm fine, but not I forgive." Halfway through the evening, I saw someone familiar near the bar. Khaki slacks, buttoned-up charisma, trying a little too hard to explain his bourbon preferences to a bartender half his age. "Marcus." I blinked. Checked my glass. Still sober. He looked deflated. Not ruined. Just smaller. Like someone had turned the volume down on his ego. I didn't approach him, but he saw me, and his face, the way it rearranged itself in real time, told me everything. He knew I'd won, not in court, not with a fight, but in the court of narrative. And there is no appeal when the audience has already left the theater. He raised his glass at me. I nodded and walked away, because closure isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes, it's just watching someone realize their script didn't get picked up. Later that night, Dana and I sat in her kitchen going over guest submissions for the next season. She handed me her laptop. One submission caught my eye. It started with the sentence, "My boyfriend thinks I don't know about his burner phone, but I do." I smiled. Let's give her a call. Because at this point, I wasn't just hosting a podcast. I was building an archive. A library of narratives where the gaslit get the mic and the quiet ones finally speak. And somewhere in the index, filed neatly under therapist, unethical, is my own little story. Not loud, not bloody, just clean, cut. I never thought I'd end up speaking at a conference, much less one about ethical storytelling. But there I was, on stage at a mid-sized venue in Chicago, holding a lav mic, staring out at a crowd of podcasters, indie doc filmmakers, and YouTubers who now saw me as the patron saint of calm revenge. They called the panel narrative control in a post-truth era. Bit dramatic. But then again, so was everything that followed after Marcus Hale let his boundaries slide into my marriage bed. I opened with a line I hadn't planned. It's easy to let people rewrite you. It's harder to publish your own cut. The room went quiet. That's the thing about betrayal. It's not just the hurt, it's the way it erases you. You become a side character in someone else's drama, a prop in their healing arc, a complication in their rebrand, until you take the script back. That conference wasn't just about microphones and lighting setups. It was about legacy, and I was starting to understand mine. Clean Cut had grown fast. Too fast, probably. We were pulling numbers that made some small cable networks nervous. And when a streaming platform started sniffing around for an adaptation deal, think Dirty John meets Modern Love, Dana and I started having meetings. Real ones. Suits. Schedules. Lawyers. It was surreal. This all started with a fake trust cleanse assignment and a GoPro in a therapy office. Now I had agents asking about option rights and episode runtimes. But not everyone was happy. There was pushback. Always is. One day, Dana forwarded me an anonymous email. "I hope you know you're profiting off people's trauma. You're no better than the ones you expose." Signed, anonymous, but not blind. I didn't reply, but I did screenshot it and tape it to the wall next to my desk. Because that sentence, it was proof that we were touching nerves. And you don't reach nerves unless you're close to the root. Meanwhile, Marissa had pivoted. I knew from a friend that she'd started a new social wellness project. Some kind of relationship alignment coaching collective. Think yoga meets pyramid scheme meets vague Instagram mantras about boundaries and high-vibe separation. She called it the Clarity Garden. Of course she did. I checked out the website. Big fonts. Airy pastels. Stock photos of people laughing at salad. And in the corner, a mission statement that made me laugh out loud. Founded by Marissa Hale, Clarity Garden offers heart-led support for those navigating disconnection, growth, and conscious uncoupling. Heart-led. The woman who used to fake cry her way out of parking tickets was now a spiritual cartographer for the emotionally displaced. Cute. She'd also apparently started giving talks at weekend retreats. I even found a video clip. There she was, barefoot on a stage, telling a group of 40-somethings with linen pants and microdose tea that shame is the echo of internalized neglect and that truth has no single narrator. A bold take, especially coming from someone who once made me journal about my intimacy trust wounds, while secretly sending flirty voice notes to her therapist over risotto. So I made a choice. One final one. I didn't want to cancel her. I didn't want to sue her. What I wanted was to archive her, document her new narrative and contrast it, in real time, with the one she thought was buried. I started pulling footage, old therapy tapes, voice memos, screenshots of her intimacy assignments, with timestamps that lined up with her so-called yoga nights. I edited it all into a single 20-minute episode. No commentary, no narration, just chronological receipts. The title? Rewriting Yourself, when the villain starts a wellness brand. Dana was nervous. "This one's sharper," she said. "It's not revenge," I replied. "It's closure." With sources cited. We released it as a bonus episode. No pre-roll ads. No sponsors. The internet exploded. People clipped it, memed it, compared it to expose documentaries. Someone even mashed it up with dramatic classical music and uploaded it as the Real Housewives of Gaslight. But the wildest part? It got picked up, not just by fans, by journalists. A mid-tier digital outlet did a feature. Then another. By week's end, Marissa's Clarity Garden site went offline. Her socials went private, and her next retreat, scheduled for a scenic New Mexico resort, was canceled due to unexpected restructuring. I didn't gloat. Okay, maybe a little, but not in public, because I wasn't just a guy who got cheated on anymore. I was a case study, proof that if you bide your time, track the plot, and let the tape roll, eventually, the mask slips. Eventually, the therapist gets disbarred. The ex-wife starts a movement. And the husband? He gets the mic. Not to scream, not to sob, just to tell the truth. Neatly cut, perfectly paced, and too damn real to edit. There's this myth that betrayal ends when the truth comes out. That once you've exposed the lies, aired the receipts, and surgically removed the rotten parts of your story, the rest of your life just clicks back into place like furniture in a clean Airbnb. It doesn't. What actually happens is silence. A long, stretching silence. Not sad, not peaceful, just uninhabited. No one warns you about the emotional real estate that betrayal vacates. The calendar opens up. The house echoes differently. Even the mirror feels underpopulated. So I filled it. With stories, guest recordings, new mic setups, live shows. We went on tour, Dana and I, packed venues. Q&As. A moment in Boston where a woman stood up during the audience mic and said, "Your show made me leave a man who called my trauma exaggerated performance." The whole room clapped. Not because of me. Because someone else had finally called their gaslight what it was. Arson with a therapist's business card. The show kept growing. Spotify offered us an exclusive. Then Hulu offered a limited docu-series. Clean Cut wasn't just a podcast anymore. It was a genre. And like any good genre, it needed a finale. Not for the show. For me. For the arc that began with a GoPro in a corner of a fake safe room. Dana had an idea. "You ever consider being the guest?" I laughed. But she was serious. "Let someone else ask the questions. Let you be the one to answer." I said no. Then maybe. Then yes. And 3 months later, I sat in a soundproof studio, opposite a journalist we both trusted, Emmy-nominated, soft-voiced, the kind of person who lets silences breathe without needing to fill them. The red light went on. And for the first time since the affair, I told it all. Chronologically. No edits. From the yoga class lies to the receipt in the car to the final therapy session, I walked into holding a digital recorder and a calm smile. It took 2 hours. When I was done, the journalist leaned forward. "Last question," she said. "If you could go back, before the affair, before the therapy, what would you tell yourself?" I thought about it, then said, "Keep the receipts, but also keep your voice. Because at the end of the day, they can steal your trust. They can rewrite your marriage. They can even make you doubt your own instincts. But they can't stop you from hitting record." She nodded. The episode dropped a week later. It became our most streamed of all time. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was quiet. Measured. Controlled. The sound of a man who had every reason to scream, but chose to speak instead. And the final twist? 2 weeks after it aired, Dana and I got an email from a university ethics board. They wanted to use that episode and the original tapes in a curriculum on therapist misconduct and power abuse. We signed the release. 6 months later, I was flown out to guest lecture a graduate class. The subject? Narrative integrity in the aftermath of relational betrayal. I walked into the lecture hall in a navy sweater and jeans, coffee in hand, not expecting much. The students were quiet. Young. Too smart to speak too soon. I opened with the question I never got asked during the podcast. What happens after the truth goes public? Silence. Then a woman in the second row raised her hand. "You own it," she said. "Fully. So no one else can twist it back." Exactly. Afterward, a faculty member came up to me. He shook my hand, then smiled and said, "You know, this was supposed to be Marcus Hale's class next semester. But well, things change." I laughed. Out loud. Not bitter. Not triumphant. Just amused by how life has this neat little way of folding back into itself. Like a script you didn't write, but finally got to direct. And as I left the building, I realized something. The betrayal? That was Act 1. The podcast? Act 2. But this quiet, strange, full circle moment, that was the closing shot. Final fade out. Roll credits. But not for me. I wasn't ending anything. I was just off script, for good this time. Subscribe to the channel